Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Paul. I'm 30 now. But back then, I was just the boy no one believed in. Not my teachers. Not my classmates. Not even my own father. You see, I was born into the kind of family people envy from the outside. A mansion in the suburbs, 2 parents still married, a twin brother who looked just like me, but everything beneath that glossy image. It was rotting. My father, Gregory Whitman, is a name known throughout Minneapolis. One of the most successful corporate lawyers in the Midwest, with his name stamped on a marble-walled firm that smells like old money and entitlement. To the world, he was a gentleman, respected, regal, brilliant. To me, he was the man who taught me what it feels like to disappear in plain sight. And then there's Nathan. My twin brother. We came into this world minutes apart, but you'd think he was born royalty, and I was the afterthought. Nathan always had the charm, the words, the polish. He made people laugh without trying. He knew how to talk to our father, when to nod, when to flatter, when to smile. Me. I spoke when I felt something was wrong. I questioned authority. I challenged the rules. And my father hated me for it. Growing up, I tried everything to get his attention. Piano recitals. Debate tournaments. One year I won the school science fair and ran home, breathless with the medal around my neck. I held it up to him and said, "Dad, I got first place." He barely looked up from his newspaper and said, "Nathan got first last year." It's not a surprise. That was the moment I felt it, something inside me cracking. Not breaking. Not yet. But cracking. Nathan and I may have shared a face, but we didn't share a future. Not in my father's eyes. By the time we were both accepted into college, the gap between us had become a canyon. And then came the day that changed everything. Graduation. The air was filled with champagne, applause, and fake smiles. Nathan's startup, some app about supply chain optimization, was already drawing interest from angel investors. My father practically beamed with pride. "He's going to change the industry," he kept saying to anyone who would listen. Then, later that evening, in his study, his sacred room filled with dark leather and cigar smoke, he summoned us. I sat in one of the heavy chairs across from him, trying not to fidget. Nathan lounged casually beside me, already knowing he was the favorite. My father cleared his throat. "Nathan," he said, "I'm giving you $1 million to launch your business. I've spoken with a few of my partners, and they'll support you too. You're ready." Nathan's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Dad," he said, sounding like a polished PR rep. "I'll make you proud." Then my father turned to me. "And you?" he said. "What are your plans?" I swallowed. "I've been working on a pitch for an ethical investment fund. Something that supports small businesses with sustainable practices. I just need some seed capital to get." He raised a hand. "No," he said, flatly. "No." I blinked. "I'm not funding a fantasy, Paul. If you want to play businessman, you'll do it on your own. But you're giving Nathan $1 million. Because Nathan is ready. You're reckless. You lack discipline. I won't throw money down a hole." I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the desk. But I didn't. I just stood up, nodded, and walked out. Because in that moment, something clicked. Something I didn't even understand at the time. It wasn't just that my father didn't believe in me. It's that he never intended to. And that night, I made a silent vow. If the world wanted to see me as invisible, then fine. But one day, they were all going to remember my name. They say rock bottom is a place where people change. But no one tells you how lonely it feels when you actually get there. After my father gave Nathan $1 million and handed me nothing but silence, I packed my things and left the house I'd grown up in, if you could call it that. A house isn't a home when you feel like a ghost inside it. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in South Minneapolis. The rent was cheap because the ceiling leaked when it rained and the heater barely worked in the winter. I slept with 3 blankets and still woke up cold. Most nights I'd sit by the window, staring out at the empty street, wondering if maybe my father was right. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I was too stubborn. But deep down, I didn't believe that. I just didn't know how to prove otherwise, yet. During the day, I worked 2 jobs. One as a data entry clerk for a small insurance company. The other as a nighttime janitor in a downtown office building. 12-hour days. 7 days a week. I was exhausted. Every part of my body ached. My fingers were raw. My eyes bloodshot. And every Sunday night, I'd open Instagram and see Nathan posing with venture capitalists, champagne glasses in hand, captions like, "Here's to big moves clinking glasses," and, "Grind now, shine later." But I knew the truth. He wasn't grinding. He wasn't struggling. He was being carried, by the same father who let me drown. And what made it worse? My mother stayed silent. She would call once every few weeks, always gentle, always trying to sound supportive. "Paul, I'm so proud of how hard you're working," she'd say. But she never confronted my father. Never questioned the injustice. She tried to walk a tightrope between her sons and the man who ruled our family like a CEO. So I stopped picking up her calls too. I stopped answering anyone. I disappeared from everything and everyone. Except one person. My grandfather. My mother's father, Henry. He lived up north in a quiet log cabin surrounded by forest. A retired mechanic with calloused hands and kind eyes, Henry had always been the only person in my life who made me feel like I was enough. When I was 10, he built me a wooden box with my name carved into it. "This is for your dreams," he said. "Keep 'em safe. No matter what the world says." So when I called him, voice cracking from months of burnout, he didn't hesitate. "Come stay with me for a bit," he said. "You need peace." I took a bus up that same week. The cabin smelled like pine and coffee and something warm I hadn't felt in years, safety. Henry didn't ask about Nathan. Or my father. Or money. He just handed me a cup of tea and said, "Talk if you want. Be quiet if you need. You're home." I stayed 2 weeks. Every morning, we walked in the woods together. He told me stories of his youth, how he once fixed a transmission with nothing but wire and stubbornness. How he built his first house with his bare hands. How no one believed in him either. "You've got the same fire, Paul," he said one morning, watching the sun rise over the tree line. "You just don't know how bright you burn yet." I almost cried. But instead, I just nodded. The day I left to return to the city, he pressed something into my hand. It was the same dream box he'd made me years ago. Inside, was a note. "If the world turns its back on you, turn toward your own grit. I've left something behind, not because you need it, but because you earned it. You just don't know it yet. Henry." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. A week later, he was gone. Heart failure. Peaceful. In his sleep. I didn't even get to say goodbye. I remember standing alone at his funeral, a cold wind slicing through my coat, the rest of the family whispering condolences as if I was some distant cousin instead of the one person he'd truly seen. Nathan gave a speech at the service. All charm. All smiles. "I always loved how Grandpa believed in hard work," he said to the crowd. I wanted to scream. "You didn't know him. You never knew him." After the burial, the family gathered at the lawyer's office to hear the will. I didn't expect much. A few tools maybe. His favorite fishing rod. But what I got was something no one expected. Not even me. We sat in a small office in downtown Duluth, just a few blocks from where Grandpa Henry used to get his truck fixed. The air smelled like old wood and dust. The walls were lined with yellowing legal books, and the light above us flickered like it couldn't make up its mind. My mother sat next to me, her eyes rimmed red but composed. Nathan was across the room, scrolling his phone, dressed in another tailored suit. My father didn't even come. Said he was too busy closing a deal in Chicago. But I was there. Because I needed closure. I thought I was just there to hear about a few personal belongings. Maybe a journal. Maybe his old cabin, which I assumed would go to my mother. But when Mr. Ellis, the attorney, cleared his throat and opened the envelope, everything changed. This will was written and notarized on June 2nd, last year, he began, glancing over his glasses. In the presence of two independent witnesses. Henry Gregory Kingstone leaves the following. I barely heard the first few items. A silver watch to my uncle. The cabin to my grandmother. But then. To my grandson, Paul Whitman. I leave the entirety of my investment holdings, including all cash accounts, brokerage accounts, and private notes. The total current value of these assets is approximately $4.8 million. The room froze. Nathan's hand fell away from his phone. My mother gasped. I just sat there, stunned. $4.8 million? That couldn't be right. My grandfather, who wore $20 flannel shirts and drove a truck with rust on the doors, had nearly $5 million. Mr. Ellis continued, unfazed. Mr. Kingstone also left a letter to be given to Paul personally. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's sharp, clean handwriting. I opened it with shaking fingers. And read. Paul. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier, but I had to wait until you were ready. I've spent a lifetime saving, investing quietly. I never told anyone, not even your grandmother. Why? Because I wanted to give you something no one else would, a real chance. Not a handout. A choice. I saw something in you when you were a kid. Not just intelligence, vision. Not just strength, resilience. You've been overlooked your whole life, but you never stopped walking forward. This money isn't just mine. It's yours now. Use it. Build something real. Prove to yourself, and no one else, who you are. You don't owe anyone anything. I love you. And I believe in you. Grandpa. I read the letter 3 times. My hands were trembling by the end. Not because of the money, but because someone had finally, seen me. The first person who didn't try to mold me into something else. Who didn't compare me to Nathan. Who didn't tell me I wasn't enough. Someone who trusted me with everything. I looked up and saw Nathan staring at me. His jaw clenched. His face tight. Mr. Ellis closed the file. That concludes the reading. My mother placed her hand on mine. Paul, this is incredible. But Nathan didn't say a word. He stood up, fast, almost knocking over the chair. Unbelievable, he muttered, pacing to the window. Nathan, my mother said softly, this was Grandpa's decision. He spun around. He barely saw Paul the last year. I was the one who visited, who sent birthday cards. No, you weren't, I said quietly, finally finding my voice. You were busy flying to Miami to party with venture capitalists. He sneered. You don't deserve it. You didn't earn it. I worked 16-hour days for 2 years, I shot back. I cleaned toilets while you played entrepreneur. I earned every ounce of this. He stepped closer. Give me a cut. I laughed. Is that a joke? He didn't answer. He just stormed out. But I saw something in his eyes before he did. Not just jealousy. Fear. And deep down, I understood why. Because for the first time, he knew I was no longer in his shadow. I was standing on something solid. My own foundation. And I was ready to build. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by silence and disbelief. The letter from my grandfather lay on the table next to the documents from the lawyer's office. $4.8 million. I could still hardly believe it. It felt like someone else's story. Not mine. But it was mine now. And for the first time in my life, I had the power to choose. I didn't call Nathan. I didn't tell anyone from the firm where I cleaned offices. I didn't post online or celebrate. I didn't even tell my mother the full amount. I just sat there in the dark, thinking. This is my chance. But it's also my moment. To prove to myself, and maybe even to them, that I was never the failure they tried to make me believe I was. I quit my jobs that week. Not with arrogance, but with purpose. I thanked my supervisors. I gave proper notice. But when I left that dingy office one last time, when I turned off the vacuum and looked out the window at the Minneapolis skyline, I knew I'd never go back. Instead, I rented a small office in the warehouse district. Nothing flashy. Just enough for a desk, a whiteboard, and a dream. I filed an LLC under the name True North Capital, a tribute to the compass my grandfather used to wear on his belt when we went hiking through the woods. No matter how lost you get, he'd say, your north is always there. I wanted this company to be my compass. A reminder that I didn't need to follow anyone else's path, not my father's, not Nathan's. Just mine. But I wasn't reckless. I spent the first 6 months doing only one thing, learning. I read every book on investing I could find. I audited free classes at the university. I watched documentaries, listened to podcasts, and studied the strategies of Warren Buffett, Cathie Wood, and Ray Dalio like my life depended on it. And I started small, investing $100,000 into a portfolio of sustainable tech startups, companies that aligned with my values. Clean energy. Ethical supply chains. Tools for small businesses. I didn't touch the rest of the money. Not yet. Because I had something else in mind. Long revenge isn't just served cold. It's served calm, calculated, and complete. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Nathan. Not obsessively. Just enough to know his Instagram photos had changed. Less champagne, more stress. His company, Everscope, was under pressure. The app wasn't scaling. One of their major investors, my father's golf buddy, had pulled out due to unforeseen cash flow issues. I smiled when I read the article. Not because I wanted Nathan to fail. I didn't. But because I finally realized something. Nathan had never built anything. He'd just inherited access. And now that things were falling apart, he didn't know how to fix them. I, on the other hand, had been sharpening my tools in silence. One day, I got a call. It was from Mr. Ellis, the estate attorney. Paul, he said, I wanted to let you know, your grandfather's cabin is officially in your mother's name now. But before he passed, he also left a sealed box in the basement with your name on it. I drove up that weekend. The drive to the cabin felt different now. Not just nostalgic. Sacred. I found the box buried in a crawlspace beneath the old workbench. It was heavy. Inside, I found 3 things. A leather-bound notebook labeled Principles. A pocket knife I remembered him always carrying. And a folded note. If you're reading this, you're building something now. Don't forget why you started. Don't chase revenge. Let it come to you. Let the world reveal itself. And when it does, stand tall. I cried reading that. Because I had started to chase revenge. But now I wanted something more. I didn't want to destroy Nathan or my father just to hurt them. I wanted to outgrow them. To build something so undeniable, they'd have no choice but to face the truth they buried for years. I was the one they should have believed in. By the end of year one, True North Capital had doubled its pilot investment. I expanded, hired a small team, 3 people who reminded me of myself, overlooked, underestimated, hungry. We worked out of that small office every day, crafting portfolios for underserved markets, helping young founders with good ideas but no connections. We grew. Slowly. Quietly. But always intentionally. I avoided headlines. I didn't pitch to big-name venture capitalists. I kept the operation lean and authentic. But then, one day, an opportunity came. One I never expected. And one that would change everything. It started with a pitch deck. A 27-year-old founder named Maya had reached out to me through a mutual connection. Her company. A small but fast-growing platform helping independent artists sell directly to clients without paying insane commissions to third-party sites. The idea was brilliant. The numbers were solid. And most of all, she reminded me of myself, smart, resilient, and completely ignored by traditional investors. We met for coffee in a tiny cafe downtown. She brought a printed copy of her financials, neatly bound with sticky notes marking key pages. "I don't have a famous uncle," she said, laughing nervously. "Just this idea. I know it works, I just need someone to believe in me." I saw myself in her immediately. 2 weeks later, True North Capital became her lead investor. It was our biggest investment yet, $1.2 million in exchange for a 22% stake and advisory rights. That deal was the first domino. Within 6 months, Maya's platform, Canvas, went viral among the art community. They were calling it the Etsy killer in some blogs. She landed a feature on a business podcast. And our little investment fund? It suddenly wasn't so little anymore. That's when I got the email. From a major VC firm in New York. "We've been following your work with Canvas and several sustainable startups. Would love to connect." And just like that, I was no longer the janitor's son. I was someone. But with visibility came proximity. And that's when Nathan re-entered the picture. I got the first clue from a headline. Everscope slashes workforce amid declining user engagement. It was on the front page of a local tech blog. I scrolled down to the comments. Brutal. Another golden boy startup going down. Guess money can't buy product market fit. My phone rang 2 days later. Unknown number. I answered. "Paul," the voice said, calm but weary. "It's Nathan." I almost hung up. But something in his tone stopped me. "I need to talk to you," he said. "In person. Please." We met at a rooftop bar in downtown Minneapolis. The same one he used to host flashy launch parties at years ago. Now it was quiet. Almost empty. Fitting. Nathan looked tired. His suit was still expensive. But his face was different. Paler. Thinner. He didn't waste time. "Everscope's in trouble," he said. "The last investor backed out. My burn rate's insane. I made mistakes." I said nothing. He took a breath. "I've been following your fund. What you're doing with True North, it's impressive." There was something sharp in his voice. Not envy. Something deeper. Resignation. "I came to ask," he continued, "if you'd consider investing in Everscope." The audacity. I took a long sip of water and leaned back. "Why?" I asked. He looked at me, almost ashamed. "Because you know how to build." I never really did. There it was. The first real moment of truth I'd heard from Nathan in over a decade. But I wasn't there to save him. You had $1 million head start, I said. You had Dad, his lawyers, his network. And now, when it collapses, you come to me. I know how it sounds, he muttered. No, you don't, I said, my voice firm. Because you've never been the one sweeping floors at night while the world clapped for your reflection. He didn't argue. He just nodded. I'll think about it, I said. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because of the people you might drag down if this fails. He looked up, hopeful. Thank you. But there will be conditions, I added. And I won't hide who I am anymore. What do you mean? I mean, when I come in, everyone will know Paul Whitman saved Everscope. Not Nathan. Not Dad. Me. He hesitated. And then he nodded. Fair. That night, I stayed up late running the numbers. Everscope was bleeding, yes. But salvageable, with the right strategy. Over the next 2 weeks, I assembled a team of turnaround consultants. I negotiated a controlling interest for True North in exchange for $2.5 million. Nathan signed the papers with shaking hands. I walked into Everscope headquarters for the first time that Monday. And I didn't walk in through the back. I walked through the front doors, suit on, briefcase in hand, while Nathan trailed behind me. The receptionist stared. Who are you? She asked. Nathan opened his mouth, but I beat him to it. I'm Paul Whitman, I said, extending my hand. The new CEO. They say revenge is sweet. But what they don't tell you is how quickly that sweetness can sour, especially when it comes from someone you trusted. Within a month of taking over as CEO of Everscope, I had a plan in motion. We restructured departments. Cut bloat. Cancelled vanity projects. I brought in new engineers, slashed burn rate by 40%, and rebranded the core product with a focus on what had actually worked. It wasn't just damage control, it was rebirth. Investors were cautiously optimistic. New press buzzed around the comeback kid, and yes, for the first time, they were talking about me. Not Nathan. Not my father. Me. I should have been on top of the world. But then, everything crumbled. It started with a simple email. Urgent, legal documents regarding misappropriation of funds. Attached was a cease and desist letter from a rival tech firm, accusing Everscope of infringing on their proprietary software. At first, I thought it was bogus. A scare tactic. But then our head of engineering, whom I just hired, called me in. Paul, we have a problem. Turns out, Everscope's new code base, the one Nathan had been so proud of, was never truly original. Years ago, in the rush to impress early investors, Nathan had hired a freelance developer who copy-pasted large portions of code from a competing open-source platform, without attribution. Now that code had evolved, been embedded into everything we were building, and it was a legal minefield. I was furious. I confronted Nathan in my office, my voice cold and controlled. You knew. He didn't deny it. I didn't think they'd find out, he said. Everyone borrows. It's just the game. No, I snapped, it's fraud. I could barely look at him. You handed me a sinking ship wrapped in a ribbon. And I walked right into it. We can fix this, he insisted. But I was already spiraling through worst-case scenarios, lawsuits, investor withdrawals, PR disasters. I spent the next 72 hours on damage control, barely sleeping, working with attorneys and tech consultants. We patched what we could, started removing offending code, and prepared for a brutal press cycle. But I was too late. The morning after we made our internal disclosures, the story broke. Scandal at Everscope, new CEO uncovers years of legal violations. They painted it as my failure. Not Nathan's. The headlines didn't care who did what. Just who was in charge when it exploded. And I was in charge. Overnight, half our investors pulled out. Employees panicked. My phone rang non-stop. Then came the dagger. An anonymous leak of internal emails, some real, some doctored, suggesting I'd known about the violations from the start. The board called an emergency meeting. Nathan was there, surprisingly silent. And then came the final blow. One of the board members, Lauren Beale, my father's old colleague, stood and said, "Based on the scandal and for the sake of investor confidence, we propose removing Paul Whitman as CEO, effective immediately." I stood. Jaw tight. Chest burning. "I've done nothing but fix what he broke," I said, pointing to Nathan. "He handed me a fraud and I tried to clean it up." But the room was already tilting. And then Nathan stood too. And spoke. "I had no knowledge of the code violations when I ran the company," he said. "And while I made mistakes, Paul assured me his plan would fix everything. I trusted him." My mouth dropped open. He was blaming me. The coward. The liar. I opened my mouth to fight, but the vote was already underway. 6-3. I was out. Just like that. Stripped of my title. Cut off from day-to-day operations. And left in a storm Nathan caused, but one the world thought I built. I walked out of that building, numb. The cameras were already outside. Microphones in my face. "Paul, any comment? Is it true you orchestrated the cover-up? Do you think your grandfather would be proud?" That one hit me hardest. Because for the first time in 4 years, I didn't know the answer. I drove home. Parked. Sat in silence. Then I walked inside, pulled out the wooden box my grandfather gave me, and opened it. The letter was still there. "Let the world reveal itself. And when it does, stand tall." I realized something then. This wasn't the end. This was the middle. Nathan thought he buried me. But he forgot one thing. You don't bury a wolf. You just give him the silence he needs to hunt. They say silence is weakness. But I've learned silence is just the pause before a storm. The world thought I was done. Fired. Shamed. Forgotten. Nathan reclaimed his CEO seat at Everscope, paraded around press interviews like nothing had happened. He told the public he was leading the company through a transition, and even thanked me publicly for my brief leadership. It was the kind of staged humility only a politician or a sociopath could pull off. And my father? He reached out once. Left a voicemail that said, "Told you not to play in the big leagues, Paul." I didn't call back. Because I wasn't planning on talking. I was planning on finishing this. First, I hired a forensic tech investigator, Mia, one of the first people I'd ever hired at True North Capital. She'd gone freelance after we downsized post-Everscope collapse, but she owed me a favor. "Can you find out who leaked those fake emails to the press?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Give me 2 days." 40 hours later, she emailed me a folder. Inside, metadata trails, server timestamps, and private Slack messages. The leaker? Nathan. He'd sent the real emails to a burner account, then collaborated with someone inside PR to enhance the wording, rephrasing internal messages to make it look like I'd orchestrated a cover-up. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. But I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about legacy. I knew taking him down through the courts would take years, and he'd hide behind lawyers just like our father always did. So I went another route. Everscope was still trying to raise capital to recover. But after the scandal, most reputable investors backed away. That's when I reached out, under a pseudonym, to one of the private firms they were courting, Hollowtree Ventures. I posed as a high-net-worth investor interested in acquiring distressed startups for long-term turnaround. I offered $5 million, on paper, under one condition, a full audit and due diligence, including access to historical documentation, code repositories, and leadership records. They bit. Within a week, HoloTree's auditors had full access to Everscope's systems. And I gave Mia the green light to quietly deliver every single file she uncovered, proof of code theft, fraud, and internal collusion, to HoloTree's board. The deal collapsed in 48 hours. But the fallout didn't stop there. Because HoloTree didn't just back out. They went public. A formal statement. We will not support a company built on lies, fraud, and manipulation. Nor leaders who conceal the truth for personal gain. Suddenly, the story flipped. This time, the press didn't knock on my door. They went straight to Nathan's. Within days, Nathan was ousted from Everscope, not quietly this time, but with an emergency board vote. Investors demanded an independent investigation. Lawsuits followed. But I stayed quiet. Until one day, my mother called. "Paul, he's ruined," she whispered. "Are you happy now?" I closed my eyes. "I'm not happy," I said. "But I'm free." She was quiet a long time. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You were always the one your grandfather believed in. Now I see why. It's been a year since it all unfolded. True North Capital has bounced back. Smaller now. Leaner. But smarter. We've invested in 6 new startups and helped rescue 2 others from going under, without ever needing to lie. My name isn't in the tabloids anymore. But it's on the lips of every founder we've helped. I don't live in the shadows of Nathan. Or my father. Or anyone. I live in mine. The cabin my grandfather left behind. I still visit it once a month. Same dirt trail. Same smell of pine and earth. Same stars above the clearing where we used to sit in silence. And I still carry the wooden box he made for me. The one that once held only dreams. Now. It holds proof. That I didn't just survive betrayal. I turned it into my fuel. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.